Good day, everybody, and welcome to this little webinar on identification of drivers and indicators, a work that we have conducted in the FoodSafeR project. My name is Beatrix Wepner, and I've conducted this work with Sabine Neuberger, and we're both from the AIT, the Austrian Institute of Technology. Now, the FoodSafeR project is a project that is trying to concentrate on innovating food safety in Europe, as there are millions of foodborne illnesses and deaths that come from food hazards. So in this project, we are striving for a joint approach to the identification, assessment and management of emerging food safety hazards and associated risks. We aim to create a proactive and holistic food safety warning and management system that adapts to emerging risks and climate impacts, and we want to design an open digital hub for real-time information and connectivity. So we concentrate on biological and chemical hazards in the European food system, and we want to promote environmental sustainability and sustainable, healthy and inclusive food systems that benefit climate mitigation and adaptation and reduce food poverty. So where are we in the project? So our analysis was conducted in the work package 1, where we concentrate on impact analysis of food system stresses and future-proof risk management. We aim to identify drivers and feed that into our open digital hub, and I will explain about that a bit later. The consortium consisted of 18 organizations from 14 European countries, and unfortunately it will already end in September this year. So what was the aim of this work package that I was talking about? Our goal is really to investigate the impact of drivers on emerging food safety hazards in Europe up to 2050. We want to find indicators to monitor these drivers and to link available data sources to these indicators. So that's the main goal. But first we have to start with identifying drivers, hazards and risks in the food system. We have various foodborne hazards, including bacteria, parasites, bacterial toxins, chemical hazards, allergens, etc. So it's quite a broad task. But we were aiming to find the drivers behind these foodborne hazards. What are drivers and hazards? So we see drivers as developments to foster change, which affect or shape the future. So that's something that is behind a hazard, something that is fostering this change and perhaps inducing the hazard or bringing it to the foreground. Drivers are shaping how society, organization, industry, research areas, technology, and so on develop. They can directly influence the food system, but also extend beyond the food system into other aspects of society. And emerging hazards that we were concentrating on may include hazards that have not occurred before, so really new synthetic or man-made substances, hazards that are present perhaps in the non-food area, but enter the food system through new channels, known hazards that we thought have extinct and now reoccur in the food chain, and hazards that have previously occurred in food but only have recently been detected. And to measure these drivers and hazards, we have to find indicators that point to the respective driver or hazard. So an indicator should ideally be a measurable factor, for example, like temperature in degrees centigrade. and they have to indicate directly or indirectly related to the possible occurrence of this re-emerging hazard or risk, and as it is in this project, or to a driver. For example, if we talk about temperature, that could be storage or transport conditions, for example. They have to provide information on the nature of the hazard or the driver, and they have to be reliable, sensitive, quantifiable, and can either be qualitative or quantitative in nature. So you see, this is not an easy task to find the respective indicators. So what did we do in the project? How did we go about? We had 3 independent literature reviews to identify and collect trends and drivers. From this, we identified 163 drivers and had to somehow structure and cluster them. There was an internal working group with the risk hazards team to condense this list of drivers and sub-drivers. And we also conducted interviews with experts to review the drivers, and we then also clustered them to drivers and sub-drivers to make it a bit more comprehensible and create a better overview. So we had this evaluation of drivers and sub-drivers. For this, we had workshops with experts to assess these drivers and sub-drivers, to comment on them, or potentially to add other drivers or sub-drivers, and especially to assess them on for their relevance and potential impact. Also, we had an extensive literature analysis of drivers for especially chemical and microbiological hazards, and all this led to a prioritization of drivers. So the outcome was then a list of drivers and sub-drivers for identifying potential indicators, and with this compiled list of drivers and sub-drivers, we organized another online workshops to compile and to match, to get a list of really measurable indicators. So from these 11 drivers that were left or that were condensed from these 163 drivers with 39 sub-drivers, we then condensed a long list of measurable indicators. So what are the drivers and sub-drivers that we concluded to be the foremost and the most important drivers for our task in the FoodSafeR project? So we organized these drivers into what is called STEEP categories. That's social, technological, economic, environmental, and political drivers. So for social drivers, we identified 3 main social drivers. That's consumer behavior, demographic development, health and well-being. Technological drivers were technologies in food production and in food processing. We had economic drivers, especially focusing on distribution. We had environmental drivers as environmental contamination, management of natural resources and bioprocesses. And for political drivers, we identified legislation, policies and governance, and geopolitical instability. I will briefly take you through all the different driver categories and sub-drivers, but I will not go into that much detail, otherwise this presentation will be too long. Feel free to stop the presentation and have a look at it in more detail. So for consumer behavior, we had 4 different sub-drivers. They were, and we for each of the drivers, we give a little description in 1 or 2 sentences. So the consumer behavior is the behavior of individual consumers, and it can influence the nutritional habits. So sub-drivers were considered as dietary choices, consumer knowledge, consumer awareness and attitude, and public awareness. The next social driver is demographic development, where we see population change, prevalence of vulnerable groups, urbanization, social welfare, and migration as sub-drivers. Another social driver is considered as health and well-being, and we specified that it is human well-being, the sub-drivers are human health conditions, perceived human health conditions, so what's your personal perception of it, like allergies, intolerances, etc., and resistant pests and diseases. The next driver group is the technological drivers. So we had the drivers in food production, where we see primary production, products for food production, bioengineering, and novel food sources as sub-drivers. In food processing, the technologies are clustered in the sub-drivers processing techniques and scale, food packaging, upcycling for food, and new technologies. The economic driver distribution is a bit more diverse, probably because it has global trade, different distribution channels that go more to regional or local levels. We have new distribution channels. There's a lot of a diversity of new paths, like digital marketplaces, ghost kitchen, pop-up stores, and all sorts of different trends. We have food fraud in this driver category, and storage conditions. Environmental drivers in the driver category of environmental contamination are agricultural pollution, pollution from other manufacturing of goods, for example, metal mining, fossil fuel use, etc., sewage treatment, and waste management. Another environmental driver is the management of, in brackets, natural resources. So this considers recycling, the use of waste stream, and water and soil management. For bioprocesses, we saw transboundary pests and diseases, and accumulation of contaminant organisms from all sources, that is called bioaccumulation. For political drivers, under the headline of legislation, policies, and governance, there are some sub-drivers. The first one is monitoring and communication of food safety. Good practices and standards, are they in place? Are they working well? Are they producing good results? Are they recommended as a model? Food legislation, of course, and food information, and that's all information concerning food made available to the final consumer. And also geopolitical instabilities, something that we have unfortunately seen in the last few years, war and conflicts, and the upcoming the trend to fragmentation between nations rather than globalization. So that's a very brief overview of the drivers and sub-drivers. What did we do with them? So in the workshops, and again, I will not go into that much detail with the work we've done. I will point you to some links and papers where you can find some more information on that. In another workshop, we took all these drivers and sub-drivers and discussed with the participants what are appropriate indicators for drivers and sub-drivers. So as an example, for the driver of environmental contamination, for agricultural pollution, and again, the indicator has to be measurable, and there have to be data somewhere available to measure these and actual and up-to-date data. So really day-to-day accessibility of new data indicators that can directly feed into our system. So for example, for pollution, energy consumption, the share of fossil fuels, and also the rates for contamination. There is data around for microbial, metal, plastic, heavy metal contamination. Sewage treatment, an indicator can be degree of wastewater treatment, and the number of sewage plants per 100,000 citizens. That can be an indicator of how good or bad a sewage, the wastewater treatment in a region is. Or, for example, for waste management, the recycling rates, food loss and food waste statistics and numbers can be good indicators for that. So we collected indicators like this for all the drivers and sub-drivers, and also asked or conducted desk research for different databases that were indicators like the suggested ones can be found. So some data, for example, for this drivers and sub-drivers and their indicators can come from the EEA, the European Environmental Agency. There are some general data at the various statistic institutes, and there are some national data, for example, in Austria, that would be the Umweltbundesamt. There are some ministries that provide national data for some of those indicators. So, as I said, more details, please, on the drivers and indicators, please see our papers that we have published with our partners in the project. This is a paper on a co-creation approach to identify the drivers and indicators for emerging food safety risks in a changing food system. And there are other papers available that can be found on our digital hub. So talking about this digital hub, what are we doing with the drivers and the indicators? What is the intention behind it? So what we are conceptualizing in the digital hub is we take the drivers and trends behind it and link them with emerging hazards. So a driver is pushing a hazard to become potentially more prevalent. For these drivers, as I said, we have identified indicators and linked them to databases behind it. So in an ideal case, one would get an alert if the indicator rises. For example, if the temperature changes, which would induce more fungi growing, so this potentially induces more mycotoxins being present. So there will be an alert. Be careful, there is an increase in temperature, it's dry weather or it's moist weather, there might be more mycotoxins present. So please do take measures to avoid the hazards or to measure more intensely certain food types to avoid these hazards or to detect them in time. Or, for example, if there is a volcanic eruption that would lead to more volcanic ash, so that could be an indicator. If there's an increase in, I don't know, volcanic eruptions, that would be an indicator, that would be an alert, and that could take on to taking measures to avoid the upcoming hazard. So where do you find this material? We have a FoodSafeR Hub. This is a one-stop shop information tool. Also on this FoodSafeR Hub, you will find the publication that I've just mentioned and some more publications. So please take a look at myfoodsafer.com, enroll and have access to all the material that we have provided so far in the project. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. Please also contact us for further discussions, for further input, and take a look at the FoodSafeR project in more detail.